Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this fireside chat, our first offline effort since March 2020. Over the course of the past 20 months, we have endured lockdowns and gotten used to attending, working, and meeting online. This event couldn't have come any sooner. Women in India today occupy 5% of executive board seats and 10% of non-executive board seats, cumulatively amounting to 17% of all board seats in total. This is significantly lower than the global average of 24%. Over 23% of large companies report that their board involved three or more women. However, 20% of females in these board seats hold more than one board seat. This is significantly higher than the 8% men who hold multiple board seats. As far as senior management positions go, women hold 39% of these. This is significantly higher than the global average of 31%. As the numbers suggest, a significant amount of progress has been made, but there's still a long way to go. IMT Ghaziabad, since its inception, has aimed to achieve excellence in training leadership, entrepreneurial talent, and research. IMT has continued to foster the worldview that promotes diversity, inclusion, and paramountcy of ethics in business. In the contemporary world, words like inclusion and diversity are more than just buzzwords. They are the sum total of experience and knowledge individuals have accumulated over the course of their lives. For a firm who can leverage these traits productively, this could mean a strategic advantage. We live in an interconnected world, a melting pot of cultures. A firm that can drive inclusion and normalize diversity can expand and grow holistically. The discussion today will revolve around the theme diversity in the workplace, incorporating and leveraging differences. It would be challenging to find people more suited and qualified to take this discussion forward than our panelists today. We have with us Ms. Mamta Saikia. She is the CEO of Bharti Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Bharti Enterprises, which is engaged in developing educational programs at primary, elementary, and senior secondary schools for the marginalized. Ms. Saikia has been recognized for her efforts over the years. Among these, Influencer Leader 2019 by AACSB International. She was named to the 100 Women Achievers of India 2015-2016 by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. And she was named ICO NGO's Karamveer Puraskar, National Citizen Award for Social Justice and Action in 2007. Our second guest today is Ms. Harpreet Datta, an alumna of the batch of 1995. She presently serves as the COE head responsible for talent acquisition and management at the GMR group of companies. She specializes in hiring for top management and building succession pipelines. Earlier, Ms. Datta was associated with companies like Princeton Review, Z Group, Fortis Health, and the Energy Research Institute. She possesses over 23 years of diverse industry experience in people management and various areas of HR management, such as compensation and benefits, HR policies and guidelines, statutory compliance, and rewards and recognition. Joining them in conversation is Dr. Vishal Talwar, Director, IMT Ghaziabad. He possesses rich professional, academic, and administrative experience. We look forward to the discussion between giants of their respective fields. We will definitely come out of this discussion intrigued, informed, and inspired. I now turn to Dr. Talwar to take this discussion forward.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think I look forward to a very enriching discussion. Thanks for coming here. How does it feel to be back to the campus?
Always a pleasure. Excited and full of energy.
It always is. One does have really wonderful memories of the time spent over here. And COVID, of course, has kept me away from the campus, but I used to come here at least once a year for some event or some lecture or the others. I've looked forward. Today was a very hectic day in the family, but I've taken out time because I can't say no to an invitation by IMT Ghaziabad.
That's very kind. I think today is a good day because we obviously having our Passion Fest, which I'm sure rings a bell. But I think we look forward to the discussion. And if you look at the overall topic, and if you look at the context of the mid-90s, when you graduated, you moved on into your careers, have things changed from your perspective in the context of the topic that we're discussing today in the corporate world?
Yeah, I remember the time, that's 25 plus years back when I was in Shriram College. I remember we were 2 girls in a class and 40 boys. Today, I'm told the demographics at that institute has changed, and it's almost 60 girls and 40 young men. So I think that's a change in the institutes. Traditionally, I know IMT used to have far lesser girls. I'm so happy to see so many of you here because at that time, I don't think there was as many numbers of women pursuing careers like that. But I think it has changed. Even the corporate numbers have gone up significantly. However, I would say there's sector, there are divergence in sectors. Certain sectors are more inclusive, or maybe the nature of the jobs, etc., allow them those diversities. And certain other industries are not as inclusive, if I may say. It's one to do with the nature of the industry. Second, I think with the policies that those organizations have chosen to have for themselves. And how critical do they think is diversity important for their growth, for their survival?
Okay. I think that's an interesting thought, that there's diversity in the implementation of diversity in a way. A lot of variability. So I think when we were speaking, possibly a few days back, you mentioned that your sector and a few other sectors have really done well, really evolved. Why, and what could be the reason for that?
First I'll take your first question first. Some of us, we may not be very alive to it and aware of it, do come from privileged classes. And I won't say simply a class, but also at times the background. Whenever there's a situation, we bring self into it. So I would say I come from a family where we were 2 sisters, but we were never made to realize that you are 2 girls, right? So you're brought up like a child. So, and you brought up like, you don't even see the differentiation, right? To any girl or even boy, if there isn't comparison or you're not made to feel yourself differently, let's say from a normal self, there is a sense of confidence and openness you bring to any role that you are playing, because you're not so much burdened by or bound by a picture of self, a comparative self that may have been created. So I am sure most of us over here from that perspective come from a very privileged kind of a background. I have seen the kind of change that I have seen is that, you see, there is self, there is role, and then there is a perception that you're dealing with. And that is what I think even she talked about, that initially you may see that girls would be preferred for these kind of jobs a lot more, right? Because while a girl may come from a self-worth of, I can do it, right? It's a role that I can do. But then she's dealing with a perception on the other side that, okay, she may be better suited for this kind of a role. I've seen that change tremendously. And a lot of credit goes to the women leaders who are paving the path, who are setting an example. And a lot of credit goes to men leaders who have kind of championed, have recognized. You see, the biggest problem of coming from a privileged place is something that I read somewhere. Privilege is blind to self. You're not aware of that you are a privileged person. So to admit that there could be something which is coloring my eyes and coloring my perception, to take a back step and say, okay, I'm going to remove this and then look at somebody in a very objective manner, is a big step. And many men leaders and women leaders. So I'm not saying that patriarchy is only in the minds of men. It is also in the minds of women, because that's the way we've been brought up. So it's even for women leaders. And it's not that, and I'll admit, it's not that each one of us have kind of arrived. I have to challenge myself so many times that, and it is not only gender that I'm talking about, you have to consistently challenge yourself that, am I coming in from my long-held perceptions? Things we read, we don't even sometimes realize we're reading things and that are drawing lines in a mind. I'll end here. I've spoken.
No, I think that's actually a good point, because the privilege aspect, and I would imagine, when you're coming in from a certain background, certain kind of schooling system, a certain ability to have access to, for the lack of a better word, comfort and luxury. It's at times very difficult when you're thrown to the lions in a way. When you actually go out there and, particularly in certain kind of industries, then you realize, hey, actually, life's not the same. Any thoughts that you have in your journey? And the other day when you were speaking, you said, I think there's some industries who have a lot to do in this sphere. Any thoughts you have?
Many thoughts, in fact. Many thoughts, in fact. The journey for me personally has been very, very interesting. And in the role that I play, I have been in the space of human resources, and I have worked with talent across, whether they were internal talent or external. And I've just met so many professionals and seen their careers through. I don't know how many CVs I would have read in my life, right, of the CXO profile, even people at that level. I think there is a general, I would take on from what she said, Mamta said, is that there is a perception about what women can do and what they can't do. And I think that perception is very often not well founded. It's just that you don't have case studies or histories or, available to say, oh, showcase the case, right? You don't have a showcase story, but that doesn't mean it's not a question of capabilities. I know of the time. I'm like just going back because we just were walking through time zones to see what was it, let's say 25 years back, and what's it now. I remember 25 years back when I joined an organization, Engineers India Limited. Women in the site were unheard of. Working on a construction and an oil and gas or petrochemical or a refinery was unheard of. But we still had one lady doing that, and she did a brilliant job. So it's just that we did not have previous case studies. But I think what I would change the direction, say, I don't think it's privileges. I would use the terms, I would replace the term privileges with opportunities. I think the opportunities that are now available, irrespective of which strata of society that you come from, has opened the door out. And consciously, governments, policies, organizations have policies around them. And I think there is a strong business case as well. I'm in an MBA institute right now, and hence I'm bringing this point up. There's a strong business case for having diversity in your organization. Even in my current organization, we have built a program, and it's a dialogue program. So I'll not delve in the program, but the key theme is, if your customers and clients are diverse in nature, which would be in a banking and FMCG, every industry, your clients, your customers are gender agnostic, or why would you have an organization which is skewed? Why would you have it? An organization is a sum total of a population, and your organization is meant to service a part of your society, which is going to be diverse. So the more diversity you bring into your organization, the more creative juices can you create. Otherwise, you're limited. And I think diversity, while today's topic is about gender, but I think diversity is so important. Right now, just imagine in this room, if all of you were just one size, one color, one gender, one background, would this course be interesting? It's just because you bring in such diversity of ideas, you come in from different regions, societies, cultures, languages, perspectives, upgrowth, bringing you up, the way your parents have brought you up. That diversity is what enriches your learning. And that holds to act for any organization, irrespective of whether they're commercial organizations or social organizations. So I would say that diversity is so important. I think it has to be like the breath of life. I would go to that extent of saying it has to be as natural as that. What we have now is a skewed society. What is needed is correction. It's actually not really progress. We're just asking for some correction, right?
That's an interesting point. And I think I want to link it up to this idea that you mentioned, that a lot of men are also championing the cause, right? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Can I do it a little differently? Like I told you that I come from a sector where, so I know how many of you know that Bharti Foundation works in education. We have our own schools and villages. And before that, I was with CRY. So I come from a place where there was a very good representation of women, So so I've experienced men at a very equal footing, right? My experience may be a little different from a corporate experience. But I would like to build her on point. I know you always ask me a question, but she gives me such good opening. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's so schools, children, villages. That's what Bharti Foundation does. And when you go into villages and your aim is to get underprivileged children in, so you think of two things. You think of caste, right? Because there are those stratas in the villages. So you make sure that you've taken the bottom of the pyramid. And gender is always at the cross section, right? So you focus on girls. So I thought that, okay, so we had a mix of kids, but we make sure that these underprivileged sections in the village, you do a survey to make sure that those kids are in, and then you open it up because there is poverty is another. So irrespective of gender, irrespective of the other strata of society, poverty is another. So anybody who's poor, cannot afford any kind of schooling, comes into our schools because our schools are completely free. Forget fees. A child has to walk in. We take care of everything, the books, notebooks, pencils, crayons, anything. So we make sure there are no entry barriers to education. Because even if you go to government school, you have to still pay for notebooks, books, and things like that. So, and this is a wake-up call that my daughter gave, that is when your kids start teaching you back. So in our schools, what we did, we said, we're going to look at everybody without the definition of where that child is coming from. So equal opportunities, equal. So if you stop coloring people once they've entered, so there is an entry process which makes sure that you've picked up the bottom of the pyramid. But once a child enters, all children are privileged children for us because we offer them really high quality education, high quality opportunities, right? I mean, we've got our children now reaching IITs and medical and things like that. So I thought that years of it by giving equal opportunities, right? That's the best way to go. And it is. Then I was, of course, my daughter has visited as a little kid as well. Then she joined Hindu philosophy, how difficult philosophy as a subject is. So one day she just turns around and she says that, while I understand your philosophy of saying that you will not recognize the barriers because you believe that self-definition has to be outside of any kind of color and outside of any kind of barrier, right? That's how you're bringing your kids up. But by not recognizing the background that they're coming from, you may not be offering them that extra support that they need, right? To kind of break the barriers, okay? I mean, you can equate it to when they say, okay, women want equal opportunities, and why are we talking about crashes in the offices and things like that? What is equal? What is definition of equal? Definition of equal cannot be coming from a space of if I may say, a privilege. I do have a privileged background, yeah? I cannot imagine what it means to be in the village and the kind of, family background that you've come from. I do not, sitting over here, I cannot claim to imagine the experiences this child is having on an everyday basis when, if the family is struggling, aaj raat ghar mein khana khane ke liye hai ki nahi? What does it do to the child next day morning? I do not know that, right? I can claim to know it theoretically, but not as a child's experience because I've not lived that. That was a wake-up call for me when she said, while you must make sure that they get equal opportunities, but always stay alive to, as somebody who's a policymaker, the challenges and backgrounds and years, generational mindsets that they may be, these are these invisible things that chain us, the thoughts that chain us. Well, that is when I started looking at, let's say, differently, how are these kids performing versus those kids? How are girls performing versus other girls, versus rest of the children? Are they going outside for competitions as much as boys? Then as a policymaker, you have to watch out. You're still not making apparent in the school that, listen, somebody is watching you as various segments. But if you don't become alive to the support that somebody coming from certain circumstances needs, then you're not making it an equal playing field.
I agree. I think to be able to make things equal, you have to understand the difference first. I think that's a good point. Now, if I look at it from a structured corporate perspective, is the same situation playing up, in the world that you've been looking at, let's say, for the last 10, 15 years?
You mean of conditioning?
Of conditioning, of this whole process of wanting to include, but somehow it's not happening.
Yeah, I think corporates have traditionally suffered this problem. There's enough statistics to show that at an entry level, there are a lot of women entering the careers. But by the time they come to the mid-level, managerial level, it significantly drops. And by the time it goes to leadership positions, I think we're in single-digit numbers. Okay. Whereas at least in today's world, there's enough opportunity provided for education. So the problem does exist. So what is being done about it? Focus is what is required. Prioritizing the need is required. And because I come from the corporate, a very different world from what she works in, building a business case for it is required, right? How bringing in diversity can enhance the organization. It's value proposition, employee value proposition. How can you build a better brand? There are brands, right? If as a woman you were asked which organizations you want to work in, you will have the top 3-4 names that'll come up to your fingers. Because these are organizations which have understood that if you need to invest in the power of both men and women, you need to acknowledge, as Mamta said, the challenges that they face and have them addressed. And I think that's what a lot of policy making has come in, which is to do with the PASH policy, making the organization free from sexual harassment. The Scratch policy has come in. It's making it mandatory to provide support system to working mothers, right? So these enabling factors are coming in, and one is what the government is doing. But I think organizations have themselves taken cognizance of this fact that they will need to do a little bit more. And all the gentlemen, young men here, please do not misunderstand. This just happens to be a gender workshop, and I talk about the women, but it's as inclusive. And here I'm going to take on that question that you asked, Mamta, before. The role that men play in this journey. To me, it is a partnership. Women cannot grow without the support of men. And men equally cannot have vibrant organizations without having women colleagues. And again, it could be all sorts of diversities. And I'm going to talk about a concrete example which happened right here at this institute so many years back in the year 1993. When I got admitted here, I joined in. And after a month, our director, Lieutenant General Serene, called me into his office. So I walked into his office and he said, Harpreet, are you aware that this is a residential course? I said, yes. It's a full-time residential course. I said, yes. He said, but I come to know that you're traveling every day to Delhi and back. I said, yes. He said, but it's not part of the program or not part of the rules. I said, I am aware, sir. But why are you doing that? I said, because I'm married and I have a 1-year-old daughter. He was taken aback. He said, but you never told us. I said, you never asked me. Nowhere in the form was it written whether you're married, whether you'd have children. So why would I go and give a self-declaration? And what's wrong in pursuing further education if you're married or children? Why is it a limiting factor? Right? So he said, but you're not, this is a very heavy course and you may not be able to cope with it. And as I was telling him, I was on the verge of tears. And I said, you know what? I left ANZ Grindlays Bank for this job, for this education. I have a child who I have at home. I'm married, I have responsibilities. You give me this one semester. If I don't do well, I will myself quit. He said, okay, opportunity given. I went back. Thankfully, I did pretty well, and we never had to have this conversation again. But I think back, when I roll back on time, I think that conversation with the director of IMT Ghaziabad, sitting here right in this campus, made a huge difference. Let us say, as a man, he had not understood this need of mine at that point as a woman student. Would I have been able to continue with my education? Would I have been what I am today? Would doors have shut to me even before they were opened out to me? So, to me, this conversation about women story being about women just doesn't fit into my mind. I think it's a conversation about society. It's a conversation about how each one can support each other and grow. And I say that to my male colleagues as well in organizations. You know, when we're doing some sessions or conversations, I say, you know, just imagine your wife is going to office. Maybe she's going through this. She's never said this to you. In a sexual harassment program, and I do programs for my senior leadership colleagues, I ask them, I mean, would you be aware that maybe your wife, your daughter is going through it in a workplace and never told that to you? So that creates a sensitivity to the issue of being gender sensitive. I'm not saying men don't have issues. I sometimes feel it's so unfair to the men, young boys, to be put who carry the load of the families on their shoulders. Keep it light. Why should it be that लड़की को शादी करके हम भेज सकते हैं, उसको पढ़ने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, कैरियर बनाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, पर अगर बेटा हो तो आपने उसके सिर पे कंधे पे पहले से लगा दिया. You've burdened his shoulder with responsibilities. Why would you do that? Let a human life grow and flower in its own way. So my experience and pitch time and again has been to sensitize managers, both men and women. Don't seek privilege as women, but ask for help if you need to. And men colleagues, just give a fair opportunity. I think that's what your women colleagues are asking for. So I rest my case here, and that's the point that I wanted to make.
I think it's a good point. This whole concept of, boys don't cry, that kind of has got so ingrained that, you're right. Both are going through their own trials and tribulations, and we would never obviously find out. But before anything else, the parameters on which you might decide to stay out of campus are really high. So you might want to.
I have to say that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the only reason when you ask for any exception to the rules of the academics is if you have a genuine problem, not otherwise. And I stand with you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. I think that makes life easier for me now.
I know. The privileges or exceptions are not to be misused.
So I think, I guess you talked about a business case. I think initially the introduction was around strategic advantage. Obviously, a lot of data suggests that happens. But is it also about the style of leadership? Is there a difference in the style of leadership?
Seems like a bit blowing your own trumpet, but so I got a call from one of my colleagues' wife. So I realized, of course, no other male boss would have done it. So I'll now tell the story. So when COVID started, lockdown started, right? First thing you were hit with, especially people who have top maids will understand. If you have a full-time maid is there. If top maid is gone, you could be CEO from 9 a.m. onwards, but before that, you're a maid of the house, right? So, and within 3-4 days, so I'm very lucky. I've got a partner, my friend whom I married from Hindu college. So we've always been friends, So immediately washing utensils was his job. Cooking was my job. Daughter was doing philosophy, so she was very philosophical about the entire thing. So she was kind of telling us what we are going through. That's her job in the family. In fact, 2 days back, she told me that, have you considered to think that you have health anxiety and you just may be bordering on depression? Do you want any help? So you have no idea what I'm subjected to at home. So, so within 3-4 days, so very neatly, he said, listen, I can take care of washing clothes and washing utensils because that doesn't require too much of skill. You look after cooking, right? So I actually, and then he bought one of those robos, that was also his job. On his phone, he will clean the house. So, but that supports, that supports. And I didn't even have to ask, because fortunately, when two friends marry, the equations are completely different. But I step back to think that how many of my women leaders are being supported similarly, and how many of my men leaders are doing the same for the wife. So, too many conference calls during COVID times. In 7 days, that realization hit me that, God, I can do this work because this support is there. So I actually, in one of the calls, I told men that, listen, you're going to tell me that how are you supporting your wife? And I actually said, ki now our calls from 9:30 will shift to 10:30. I'm giving you that hour, But please tell me what responsibility, morning, evening, you've picked up to support your wife. And I do not want to hear who's a homemaker and who's not a homemaker. These are very difficult circumstances. Even homemakers had top mates to support them, right? So, and I asked women, do you need my help? Do you want me to hold a call with your husbands? But, so then that was when wife of a colleague called back to say, ki, it was such a wonderful step that it's not that he wasn't helping, but then he came back and said, ki, ab to mujhe, sometimes you look for these bahana. Boss ne bol diya, to KPI hai, karna padega, although he was doing it. In any case, it does make a difference when we started full time initially. Now I know that people have allowed maids in. But after the second wave, I think psychologically, we all were very badly hit. Second wave was not easy on anybody. And I knew that while we started office, most of the women hadn't allowed the top maids in, So I said, if office hours are till 5:30, you're all allowed to go home 4:30, because I know that there is, now that you're outside in the office, the pressure of cooking and cleaning increases a lot more. So it does, because if you have somebody who has, home, also in the context of things, I think it does make a difference.
Right. What would you say?
I think the style of leadership, and again, there's enough research around it, has evolved. I think post-COVID, there's a huge change. And I would think that inclusiveness is an extremely important trait that any leader, manager needs to have. It is not a good to have. It's a must to have. And why I say that? So there are the new age skills. Okay, let's call it the post-COVID skills, are agility, flexibility, ability to adapt to adversity, diversity. These are inclusiveness. These are the new sets of skills. They've always been there, but which have taken center stage. So to actually think that you could have an organization or a team by not being inclusive is not an option. I hope you see it through what I'm saying. Can you be a team leader and have 10 people under you and expect them all to be homogeneous? It's not going to happen, right? That's not the way teams are built. Today in this campus, right now, I'm sure we have a diverse team. So if the good thing about having sessions like this is it puts the conversation at the center stage. And the moment the conversation is center stage, what does it do? It gets us thinking about it. It makes us make conscious choices. And I think what conversation like this do is put that conversation, that thought right in the center and admit that you need to be doing more. And here I would go even beyond gender diversity at this stage. And I have, in my own experience, seen that people who come from diverse ideas just give you a far better 360 view of a conversation, of any discussion. And I think that is the value creation. That helps you solve every sort of problem. That helps you to be thinking through. That helps the team be dynamic, agile. Otherwise, it's very easy to become dead wood.
So would this style of leadership ever fire, let's say, 2,000 people over a Microsoft Teams call?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'll tell you why. Like she said, that one call that she made to her team, male teams members, made a difference. when the leadership stands up and says, I need this organization to provide fair opportunities to people. I need merit to be valued. I need talent to be rewarded. It's huge. It percolates down. It percolates in the culture of organizations. And when it percolates in the culture of organizations, it's like that push she spoke about, which every participant in that organization, every employee in that organization imbibes to form and build that culture of an organization.
So to add to her point, when we say diversity, of course, the standard definitions aside, I've actually realized, so when program team are MSWs, Masters of Social Work, right, who are conceptualizing program on the ground. They're like your counterparts. I'm sure it's happening in corporate houses as well. So when programs are being conceptualized, I make sure that the penultimate presentation happens when there is one finance guy, one HR guy, one partnership person sitting in the, so because what happens is diversity is not because, okay, I come from a gender perspective, or I come from south of India, or I come from north of India or east of India, but even people who are trained, finance people are trained to look at things in a certain manner, HR people are trained to look at things in a certain manner. I haven't seen that the final idea or the final strategy of any department, when thrown to some of the interesting people of every department, has kind of taken ideation and, I can't say it's the strategy to another level, but yes, of course, the pieces of that strategy is huge. So I've seen that encouraging that kind of diversity, that there is, organization isn't divided in silos anymore. There's ownership and ideation. It does help tremendously.
Great. No, thank you for that. Let's take a few questions from the audience. We have limited time, so if anybody has questions, please feel free. If you just, the students, if you could just say your name and then ask your question. Go ahead. Then maybe a year after that.
Yeah, so a very heartening conversation, and so I'm a faculty here, and coincidentally, I'm also, this topic is of very, close to my heart, and I have developed an elective around that. So around diversity and inclusion. So this whole dialogue, this conversation, I'm really, into it. One thing I wanted to check with you, because one of you are coming from a corporate background, and one of you are coming from it's more like a social enterprise, and both have different type of challenges. But one question, as as a facilitator for diversity and inclusion, I keep on experiencing and discussing with people is about how do you, different organizations, they do have different initiatives around diversity and inclusion, but majority of them, they are not able to close the loop. So how do you assess the impact of those initiatives? Because this becomes one of the trickiest questions for the corporates as well as the social enterprises. So maybe you can throw some light on your own experiences around that.
So I'll start. And, so the two aspects to when we look at diversity, and now I'm saying not only gender, for me, the different strata of society, all of that is also important. I'm just not using the word not comfortable. Like I say, I believe don't acknowledge it, then it won't happen. But that's a very privileged position. One is sheer numbers. Like we say, this is a percentage share. But for me, all of you know, those are vanity KPIs, right? Looking at numbers is very easy. So each year, as we close, let's say performance management, what is the real impact? If I'm saying, I'm sitting here and saying, hey, I'm a woman CEO, and in my organization, if women are not feeling safe, then where would they feel safe? So how do I look at the difference? Me, myself, or any CEO would have made. So I actually, our head of HR has a different slide where he says the complete gender impact. So we are monitoring when it is rating happening, sufficient representation, promotions happening, sufficient representation. We have these glow programs, which are identifying leaders, second in lines who have to be built into, and things like that. So we do that slicing and dicing both ways. So not only for employees, so my head of HR has to convince me that enough opportunities and support has been given. It isn't at the end of it, how many will reach and get that is a different issue, but the consideration set, right? And that head of HR had that in consideration. It's not that blindly, and let me tell you that when I'm looking at teachers, all the principles would come from, the state of society, which is, right? So the biases are something that you are blind to. Each of us is a very good person. None of us sitting over here is hey, I don't believe these kind of people should be given promotion. None of us come from that kind of a background. Our principals in schools are extremely good human beings. But sometimes when you look at yourself as a human being is also privilege speaking. When you're not looking at yourself as I'm a woman, I'm disabled, right? So you have the privilege of looking at yourself as a human being because you do not have any of the, let's say, underprivilegedness attached to you. And initially, I actually found that there was a skew towards not teachers from certain strata were in rating 1. Correct? You have to sensitize them, and for them to, complete credit for system to step back and say, am I being fair and objective? Because in any appraisal system, there are certain things which are objective, but there are always certain things which are subjective. And it is not a conscious bias. We all are better than that. It's not a conscious bias. So one has to go beyond vanity parameters and look at what is the kind of change you would like to see in environment. Sensitization, and like she's saying, conversations is something that changes mindsets.
Respond to that. I think most organizations handle the four M's as they classically call it. I don't know if you're aware of it. For women in a woman's career, first is marriage. What they call the possible derailers of a woman's career. First is marriage. Second is maternity. Third is motherhood. And fourth is mobility. I would love to add menopausal also as a fifth. Okay, so these are the four stages at which a woman's career can hook, or there is a possibility of getting unhooked. Now, what's important for managers, irrespective of the genders, is to provide support at that point of time, either through organization-wide policies and support mechanisms, like a crutch is one important one, right? Either through that, or just understanding that this brilliant team member of mine is going through a phase where she needs to take time off, right? Or she needs space at the moment, because it's not that she's sitting idle. She just has so many other responsibilities which she's fulfilling. She's multitasking in a big way. And so she needs to be supportive. Just be supportive at that stage. If she wants to go home early someday, why should the earth fall? As long as you're fulfilling your responsibilities, and as far as you're being, responsive and responsible to what work has been assigned to you, why should it be a problem if someone left home? And that's where the rule making comes in, right? My office time is 6 o'clock, but somebody wants to go at 6. Can I be flexible about it? Of course, you don't misuse. The caveat is don't misuse the system, don't abuse the system. But can you be flexible about it, right? If a child is not well, can she, on a particular day, if she requests for a work from home, can you allow for it? Is it okay to do that? Right? So that is a sort of framework that I think organizations need to be built. And organizations, if you see, who have done well in their women representations, whether at the entry levels or at the top levels, as they've grown up in the leadership roles, have been able to provide such opportunities. And hence, please, I come back to the young men and the women in this group. Each one of you makes a difference to this dialogue. Each one of you brings in that diversity. And here, gender doesn't count, right? It is not only a woman's problem. Because I would rather have a woman team member, who's going through there's one of these 4 or 5 M's in her life, who's committed to the work, who's brilliant with her work, and who's wanting to make a difference, than a male colleague who just wants to pass his time. And that's my choice. right? And I'm sure many of you would make that choice. So I think the conversation is about enabling. I think the word is enabling, and hence sensitizing all of us is important. I would put that as a center of the conversation here.
Absolutely. I think enabling is very important, irrespective of whether it's male or female. I think it's a good point. And this kind of takes me back to, we were designing a women leadership program at another institution. And when the CEO looked at the program, he says, it's not the women who require to do this program, it's the men who require to do this program. And it kind of tells you, and I think it kind of links up with what you were saying earlier, the support mechanism in the system. What is the current leadership doing about it is actually very important, more than essentially a tick box exercise. Right. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you so much for such an insightful and enriching session. I think somewhere this topic is always in our subconscious mind, and it needs to take a center stage once in a while. So it was quite intriguing to hear you both talk about it. So my question is to Mamta ma'am. Ma'am, my name is Mitali. I'm from PGDM executive batch over here. So you spoke about, equal opportunities being ineffective for these students who come from the underprivileged background. And somewhere we need to track their backgrounds also to understand how it will be effective, how education will be effective to them. So I have also worked in the education sector. I carry that experience. I have seen it from the ground level, what are the challenges these students are facing. So how do you think this can be incorporated somewhere in the policies, and how can organizations overcome this? Because it is a very big challenge to understand each and every child at its own individual level. So do you think will it be possible in the near future?
So there are two levels to it. One is at policy level, like you said. Second is every teacher, ideally, what is the role of a teacher? Every teacher has to not just know the name of the students in her class. A real teacher is who actually knows what is the home background this child is coming from. And in Satyabhati schools, in our schools, that is a minimum expectation from every teacher. Because if they don't have that, then we're not a sensitive organization. We like, that's a differentiator really. So what we do in case of social category and gender category, there are data always helps. So one is you have to put right kind of policies. You have to train your teachers on it, that if external competitions are happening, please make sure there is an equal representation from various. So it has to be it has to be a written document. But things which are written, and if you have a big schooling chain, so the things that are happening on the ground could be very different from the policies that are there. But thankfully, thanks to technology and things now, sitting at head office, we do monitor if there's external competitions, if awards are being won. You're slicing and dicing the data, right? And let me tell you, this is around 8 or 9 years back. So 10 years back, we started a system of head boy, head girls. Pehle our schools were very chota schools. So when they moved into elementary, senior, secondary, we said, let's have head boy, head girl system. Everything that is there in a privileged school is there in our schools, right? And the same process. Now, head boy, head girl, head girl is going to be girls only. So there is this larger student council where you will monitor the share of girl students. Then we did social category slicing. In our school, 77% of the students come from social category. But when you look at the share of head boy, head girl, right? So there was one particular district where I found, so in rest of the districts, it was reflecting the population percentage. The probability, if 70% of your students are coming from a certain social category, the probability of a student becoming a head boy from that category or a head girl from that category is much higher, right? But not in one district. Now, what does it tell me? Identical schooling system, identical policy processes. Obviously, there is a problem with leadership, right? So that is when you then do the corrective act, which is you do awareness workshops, you show them the data, this is what's happening in other places, this is what's happening in your district. Do you think we have something to reflect upon? This is policy monitoring, corrective action, right? Then our teachers and principals, and I'll just tell you one story to tell you, you see, as a As a schooling system, we have defined that what we want Satyabharti school teachers to be. And it very clearly says that a Satyabharti school teacher is a teacher 24 hours of the day and is not limited to only Satyabharti school students, which means our expectation from our teachers is, if you're walking in a village and if you see a child crying, you will find out why the child is crying and make sure you take action. Gum gaya hai to ghar chhod ke aao, mummy ne mara hai to mummy se baat karo. That is our, so expectations have been made very clear because these are our culture, this is our culture, these are our ethos. If this is what our expectation is from our teachers, so let me tell you a story. When I go to schools and I'm talking to teachers, the kind of things that I hear from my teachers is, ये बच्ची ना public bus से आती है. You comfortable with Hindi ना everybody, right? ये बच्ची उससे आती है, public bus से आती है. तो इसको कई बार तो पैसा नहीं है पेरेंट के पास, तो कई बार तो वो पब्लिक बस में भी लोग फ्री ले आते हैं, वो मिस हो जाती है तो ये पैदल चल के आती है. जिस दिन ये पैदल चल के आती है, पहले मैं इसे इन आवर मिड डे मील, देयर नो कैंटीन, दे डोंट ब्रिंग मनी, वी हैव आवर ओन मिड डे मील थिंग, वहाँ भेज के पहले फटाफट कुछ खिलवा के उसे कहती हूँ फर्स्ट पीरियड मिस करो, वो रेस्ट रूम में जाके रेस्ट करती है, सेकेंड पीरियड से फिर वो अटेंड करती है. नाउ दैट सेंसिटिविटी कैन ओनली कम इन इफ एट पॉलिसी लेवल, from me to regional heads, to district heads, to cluster heads, everybody has shown identical sensitivity. Then it flows down to the child. So it's very important for leaders to walk the talk. Why am I wearing a mask today? I came wearing double masks. Double masks are very difficult to breathe in because in our school, the rule is everybody, including students, will wear a double mask. Okay? Just beginning of November for PP first, second and third, I have allowed second mask to be. बड़े छोटे बच्चे हैं ना, तो अब क्योंकि गांव में बिल्कुल भी cases नहीं है, तो I have just allowed second mask for PP first, second and third. Fourth onwards, everybody in double mask. We have breathing spaces. तो छोटा बच्चा तंग होता है ना, तो mask उतार के, our schools are in very open compounds and things like that, which is where they can sit there, take off the mask and, you know. All our teachers are supposed to wear double mask. It's very difficult. At the time of teaching, if they have an N95, only then they can take off the second mask while teaching. There are breathing spaces for teachers. So she can take her chai and sit under a tree and take a break. If any of this video is seen by my team, if they see me without a mask, then I'm not living the discipline that I have imposed on them. I cannot. I have attended my family wedding in Amritsar where nobody was wearing a mask. Me and my family we worn our double mask because I'm not even speaking there, right? So when I'm not speaking, I will be in double mask. So I have to live through the values, and that is what the entire Bharti Foundation man, and that's true of any. So if you say this is what I expect of you, management has to live that day in and day out. I will not be caught without a mask. Except for when I'm solo, I have a lot of rules when I make videos. Shubham asked, would you make a video? I said, no, I'm not making video because you guys can't follow my rules. I'd asked for windows to be open, doors to be open. I have a lot of rules, right? So when I make a video, the guy sets a camera for 30 minutes, air passes, only then I will come, camera is set, only then I have to live this.
True.
And that is a touch wood. We were really saved in second wave because everybody in Bharti Foundation and their families were wearing double masks. At the end of the day, masks save you.
Right. No, I think that's a good point. Questions, please? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I'm a faculty here. So Harpreet, my question is to you. Rather, that's an observation from what you said. You said that, after a point, middle management level, women, kind of become, they become stagnant in their career. Not stagnant exactly, but what I'm trying to ask is at the leadership level, you don't see that many women, right? Because we asked this question during interview time, name women leader, and they are all fingers. So we know those 5 names or 6 names are going to come out always. So why is that vacuum there? Where if we talk about gender diversity, so why it is only limited at the entry level? Why aren't we talking at the leadership level? Why don't we see? Is it because of the social fabric, or is it because of the kind of policies that the organizations follow? What it is? Thank you.
interesting question that you've asked. Actually, there is a pull and a push factor working here. I think the drive of women also becomes important. Probably when you're running a double race, and I can say it with my own career, my own, balancing between my home, my kids, my in-laws, my parents, my, children. I mean, all of us go through that, right? A career, a full-fledged career, a demanding career. I think there's some sort of a fatigue that's probably happening. So women need to give themselves a kickstart again, reboot their careers, refresh themselves, probably go for a further education, reboot themselves, rejuvenate themselves, refresh themselves. Point number one. So, and that comes with your drive, of course. If you have the drive, you really see yourself sitting at the top, then you need to be willing to push. That's one element of the conversation. So women themselves play an important part in building their careers, which they cannot say, oh, I was not given opportunities. I think that's a very unfair conversation. If the door in this place is not open, knock at another door. If another one doesn't work, look at an opportunity somewhere else. What tells you that you have to be successful exactly in that space? Recreate your expertise, re-educate yourself, reskill yourself. So there is a whole woman. What can women actively do to build their careers? I think is conversation number one. Conversation number two is, which we all need to understand at the mid-ages. And I think that this holds true even for men. It's just that we don't acknowledge it. If you're a married woman or a married man, you're balancing two generations. You're managing a generation which is younger, you children, most of us. I'm saying, of course, there could be people who choose not to be married. I mean, I'll park that aside for now. But you managing children, they're in the growing stages. You're probably managing your in-laws, your parents who are at another generation, and you need more medical help, more support. So very often it's observed that women, at least, men are, because with the support of their life partner, the woman, the men are making a choice to invest in their career. The women are making a choice to invest in the family and the relationships and the future of their children or the health of their elderly parents and in-laws that are at home. So I think it's also natural, and this takes us back to what Indranui said, about women can't have it all. So I think it is that space in life. If you're able to manage that space intelligently, and here's one tip I'll give everybody. I know this generation has a good bit of it, but I'll still nevertheless make a very obvious statement. Take help. Ask for help from your mother-in-law, your sister, your parents. Take support when you require, especially at these stages of your life. Outsource work which you can outsource. There's a joke in my house saying कि mama जो काम outsource कर सकती है कर देती है. मैं कहती हाँ, because my mama superwoman नहीं है. She has to manage certain things, and if I can outsource a few things which I know can be well taken care of somebody else. In organizations, we call it empowerment. We have better words for that. So I'm just doing that and able to focus my energies on what I believe is my passion, my commitment, my, career life. So good. So I think that's those phases of your career need to be well balanced. And I think here, your reporting manager makes a big difference. Again, I will take the classical example of Indranui. Have you ever heard her interviews? If you've not, please do it. She would say that when I was in my office, my kids would come from school and play under the tables of my office. So who allowed that to happen? The reporting manager. So when all of us come to managerial roles, again, that's what my conversation is dwelling around this space about being sensitive, having conversations, acknowledging, being flexible in your approach. Of course, that doesn't mean breaking rules. Please don't misunderstand me. Right? Being flexible in your job and adaptable. I think then you just cross that threshold and then you're done with it. But at that time, it's very tempting to step back, step out of the race. But many people, for either the life situation or the choices they made or not getting support from their families and their immediate, are having to pull out. So basically, pipeline hi pata is narrowing. That is the issue. I hope I've answered your question.
Very well, very well. Thank you.
So these are notes to myself. A lot of very good advice. It's already. If you look at this, it's all full. Right. So next question. I think we have time for 2 questions now. So if there's anyone who would like, yes, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ayushi Saraf, and I'm a first year student here at PGDO Marketing. Firstly, it's been a great discussion. All the domains that we've discussed for gender inclusivity and everything that's been related to it, and all the industries, in fact, how they've been, inculcating all these habits. So, really, really insightful discussion. My question to you would be, so what would be your suggestion to all the women out here, and in order to balance a work life, like in order to have a work life balance in their lives moving forward, as we've seen how COVID has affected us and how it has completely changed the way we work and we live. And how even during the COVID, we could see the work seeping into our personal space and vice versa. So, moving forward, how are we supposed to maintain a healthy work-life balance?
Another question. But yes, I think I would like to take this opportunity of communicating this. You have to remember,
Yeah.
hello? Am I audible?
No. Can you switch this on, please?
Am I audible now?
Yeah, we can just.
Hello. Yeah. So I think I'll take this opportunity to address what I have to say. Each one of us has to remember that life, a career, is not going to be a straight upward graph. I've just seen so many profiles and CVs of CXOs and CEOs and CFOs to understand very deeply that the graph is not like this. Every career is going through its ups and downs, some a little higher ups and downs, and some a little lesser, right? So what happens is if you are intelligently, you are able to manage that. Suppose you are at a stage of life when you need to give more attention to your family, let's say, personal life. Then go at that pace in a career where you can sustain it. But let's say you are out of that phase, then take on mega projects, volunteer for those projects. Be smart with the choices that you're making. You don't have to, at every age and phase of your career, you don't have to be aggressively pursuing your career at the same pace. It's like a car that you're driving, right? You have gears, you can speed it up, you can slow down, as long as you're moving ahead and you're reaching your goal and you know where you want to go, you should be good with changing gears. So I think that would be, if you could imbibe that, I think that will just help you solve a lot of. And second thing I said, ask for support. Don't shy to ask for support. Don't shy to say, Mama, come home, do this for me, or sister, ask your sister or your sister-in-law, anybody in your family, or even your husband or your family members, your brothers. What's wrong? You're trying to do the best that you can. Just be sincere, that's all, I think.
Absolutely.
I would add to what she's saying. I completely agree, so I won't repeat that. But in every stage of life, define balance for yourself. The definition of balance is not the same. So like she said, when you're young, let's say you're yet not married, right, don't have a kid, then if you're aggressive in taking on more and more projects, right, which is fine, correct? Come next stage, now you define what is balance for you. What does it mean? And like she's saying, you get taught networking to build your career, relationship building, to make sure that your brother or your sister-in-law or your mother-in-law will look after your kid when you want to, also means investment in relationships. Networking is not only for professional growth, correct? And people would know that investment in personal relationships takes a lot more. Yeah, it's the same one, yours. So, investment in personal relationships takes a lot more effort than professional relationships, right? So, have your own definitions. Do not go by anybody else's, because that puts additional pressure on you. Hey, she's able to manage like this because she's got, mother-in-law at home. I don't have that and I can't compete with her. Have your own benchmarks for performance. Have your own definition of that. That's the only way you'll survive. If you go by somebody else's parameters, definitions.
Thank you. I think that's a good point. Your own definition of work-life balance. Otherwise, work-life balance tends to become Yeah. Right. So one last question. My apologies, but there'll have to be one last question.
Yeah,
Four hands.
And I need to hear from some male members speaking. All the women asking. Now, this is a different sort of an issue.
This goes to the conversation that both of you have been having regarding privileges. And I've worked in the industry for more than 10 years, and it's taken me my experiences leading team of both genders to understand what male privilege actually is and how we need to understand and be empathetic towards the other gender. Unfortunately, was not able to see that in any of the sensitization course or workshops that were there in the organization. Do we see a change going forward? Maybe the organizations, maybe the management looks into that and sensitize the male population to understand what are the needs, what are the requirements, and rather than equality, we speak about equity for the women as well.
Because I know you, and we work in the same organization. He's coming from GMR Group. Remember the series we started on harmony. So we started an internal series called Harmony, and we just said call it Harmony or Gender Diversity Dialogue. And we are an organization which has about 85% of men and 15% women representation. And initially the thought was this session is for women. And I said, no, it cannot be at you can't talk about gender sensitivity without having men involved in the conversation. And just for your information, the 1 year that you've been studying here, we covered almost 5,000 people. We're about 5,000 people now. We almost covered everybody. And men have actively participated on those programs and dialogues because they could relate to that when it came to their ecosystem. So organizations are doing a lot on this. I think it's about us also picking and engaging. See, if an organization provides you with, right now there's a session here. There are some of you who have chosen to sit here. There are some who I'm sure have chosen to stay outside, right? So you need to be involved in that conversation, right?
Very true. I'm glad to hear that we are moving forward in this space.
So Ankush, in the 1 year you've been here, there's a lot has happened at GMR.
Absolutely. I think.
All right. Professor Shelja. Well, I think you all have to solve this now. Can Professor Vinayak go first? Okay, Professor Vinayak, I think. Go ahead. Look behind you.
So, what I'm essentially finding since beginning is that the issue of equity, equality, diversity, inclusion, this all is happening within the boundaries of the organization. And this is the time when organizations are going beyond their boundaries, particularly in the context of US ma'am. So when an organization goes beyond its own boundaries, develops partnerships, and probably outsourcing, if I can say, has become also a quite popular theme. So how an organization within your own space, a part of which has already been outsourced, how do you ensure equality, diversity, inclusion to your outsourcees or to your partners? And by the same token, the way economy is changing, we are finding many platform-based players. How do you foresee that this dynamism in the environment actually will pose a challenge to this entire dialogue on equality and diversity?
So I'll take it first because the space where I come from, the inclusion, at least 20 years back, was much lesser than it is today. Then I'll ask Harpreet to add. So I'll tell you two stories. Is this live on YouTube and everything?
Yes, it is live. Currently.
Okay. At the end of the session, then I'll ask a question where I would want cameras to be switched off. So before I became CEO, I was program head, right? And I was visiting schools and villages, and the community does insist ki ghar aiye, chai vai pijiye, and things like that. So I went along with the 3 members of my field team. By chance, 3 males. Now the tea came, and obviously it was served to males first, and my team members wouldn't touch it because ma'am ko diya nahi, right? So she crossed me, and the tea went to, right? So obviously they're like, ma'am go, you know, trying to handle. Story number 2. again a village. And it was very initial years of, see, these stories are of very initial years, because now when I go, we've been in the same villages for over 15, 16 years now. 54% of our head teachers are women. Imagine in a village, there's a women leader to whom male, female teachers report. Our women teachers carry a laptop. Our women teachers talk to sarpanches and negotiate what they want for the school. They go and address gram sabhas, right? EY did a social impact study and they found out that places where our schools are, people belonging to lower caste community are participating a lot more in gram sabha, because we have in our PTMs, parent teacher meetings, we've given them the voice. We listen to them, we make changes as per what they want. So, for an underprivileged person to realize, oh, I have a voice and it gets listened to and action can be taken. So they actually found that the villages where we were, their participation increased in gram sabhas. But point I'm making is, we're changing mindset in the villages where you are. Imagine a girl entering a school with a laptop and who's a leader. If a sarpanch comes, it's not going to be a male teacher talking to him. It's going to be a female head teacher talking. So these are initial stories. Parent teacher, so it was a community meeting. I had gone, so I had said, call parents. All men, women there, all women. Okay? Cut today. 2 years I haven't gone for any community meeting. Now if I go, mothers per se are more involved in their children's education. Right? Same village. I would have all women and smattering of men sitting, with one thing is that break that men have to be here, women have to be here is gone. Right? So if you believe in something, you have to exhibit that behavior with all honesty enough number of times to break mindsets, right? So I would say community is our nearest partner. What is the point of creating an island of a school saying that here girls will get equal chance if they go back home and they don't find the same equity, right? So changing mindsets is important, and it is best done through actions, right? Apart from that, at least in Bharti Foundation, when we are looking at vendors and all, we do keep a watch of gender representation and other representation. So we do always watch out for that.
So I must say, this opportunity that we in GMR also have a GMR Varalakshmi Foundation, and we do a lot of work, and we have schools and actually work by chance very actively on those, from Anganwadis to primary schools, to secondary schools, to an engineering college, arts college. We have hospitals, mobile hospitals. So the question about what are corporates doing about it, corporates are also actively engaging in these conversations. They're going beyond. And I'm talking about GMR not before the CSR Act came into place and investments had to be made. As part of its cultural ethos, I'm sort of talking about GMR right now, but yes, it's contextual, is that the organization has invested in community development from the very beginning, 40 years back, much before these acts came into place. In fact, the CSR Act that came into place, GMR was the founder organization and had worked and brought this policy into place, was among them. So I think corporates have a huge part to play. Social organizations have a huge part to play. I would even very simplistically say one mind changed is a ripple effect, right? One colleague in my office, a male colleague who changes his lens and says, you know what, equal opportunity, or for irrespective of, as I said, gender, just diversity, goes and builds those, expresses those changed behaviors at its home environment. And we've seen that. As I told you, there's one small program here, I was just talking about the Harmony program. Initial, after the first age, we just had men pouring into the program, right? Men pouring into the program because now they were seeing something through a different lens, and they saw the value of it back home. Now they knew that when they told their daughter, "Ladkiyan aise nahi karti hain," they were being unfair to her. They were clipping her wings even before she had flown. Or if they put undue pressure on their sons, and we use that clip which you refer to, Boys Don't Cry, as part of the program. We use that to break that ice right in the beginning. And then when a young boy is constantly stoned, you can't be emotional, you can't feel hurt, you need to be macho, you need to be so strong and superhero, it's so unfair to the child. He's equally learning and going through that journey, right? So why would you put such undue pressure on him? So I think that's why I think this dialoguing on such matters is important, because it's like putting it right in the center, looking at it, discussing it, seeing the pros and cons of it, and hopefully making some significant changes in the lenses through which we see life. And hence, it impacts our societies. I'm sure a father who's gone through an open session like this, when he goes back and looks at his own daughter, his wife, the way he treats his wife, the way he treats his sister, I am sure there's going to be a difference. So I wouldn't undermine the power of conversation and dialogue.
I think it's a very good point. The conversations, dialogue, and doesn't require too many people to make that change. One person could possibly trigger a lot. Professor Chandra, you had a question?
I didn't have a question. I just had a few observations. So first of all, thank you for this conversation. Very close to a lot of our hearts here and very insightful. So it is still sad that, we have a dialogue around, if we talk of gender diversity, we have a dialogue around, how women, in a way, in most households, bear the brunt of making a choice of their career, because they are supposed to manage both house and office, which probably is not the case with males. So, and we still talk about bringing in we still talk of inclusivity in terms of women. There is no dialogue, or there is very little dialogue about parenthood rather than motherhood. There is very little dialogue about paternity. We talk about a woman undergoing so many changes and pressures in her maternity. I'm sure men also have so many pressures in paternity. I'm sure men also have so many pressures when they are undergoing parenthood. That's an experience for them also. So while on the one hand, there is a lot of pressure on women, but I think there's a lot of unsaid pressure on men also, and high time that as organizations that dialogue is there and that conversation is there around it. Just that.
Very, very valid.
I think it's a very good point. For all those who have male partners here, in the evening, please go back and ask, can we have a dialogue on this? Can I take your backpack off your back? For all they might just say, take it, please, Right, thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll end with a male question. Is that all right? I think you had raised your hand earlier, right? Please ask your question. Thank you. No, I think when that comment was, males should ask questions. So I wouldn't even know what question this is, but we would end on a male note.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a wonderful session. I have a very small question. So we see that in the starting also, we see that the role of women in the top organization is very less, so there's less representation. Would the future would be different, and what role would be the women playing in bringing about the much needed change?
You have to allow me to answer this question.
No, you only have to answer. I can't. I just want to say you make the change.
No, I have to answer. Do you have a CEO sitting here? What more do you want? There is a woman CEO sitting right in front of you. Isn't that a live example of leadership happening? Change is happening. I think it's also because I think my own assessment is you're going to see more and more women lead organizations, because the supply issue by and large, when I mean supply, it's not like, don't take it. It's the supply. That's people walking into, women walking into educational institutes, women walking into, organizations, and numbers have increased because of obviously policies and opportunities being available. So there are going to be more women who are seriously contesting those positions. So you have a live example of a CEO who's sitting right next to you, and hats off to you for making it there in a world. And I'm sure it must have been a different and a challenging journey, but that's where it is. So more women, equal opportunity, and make the change. Be the change, right?
Exactly.
We're going to end up with that. Be the change
You want to see.
You want to see.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. I mean, I hope in the next 10, 15 years, this topic on this kind of platform may not be required.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's hope that happens. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, before we part for the day, I invite Professor Garg to felicitate Ms. Saikia, a mentor, to mark this occasion. Now, I invite Professor Tripathi to felicitate Ms. Datta. Thank you, professors. Now, as a token of thank you, Ms. Saikia would like to present a book to to Dr. Talwar.
I actually have kept 2 books. I don't know how one book has come. So, Dr. Talwar, what I'm going to do is, I'm giving it to you, but you give it to her.
Okay.
Because to you I can make
That's
it,
fine,
right?
that's fine.
I'm so sorry. I asked 2 books to be careful.
It'll be my pleasure.
This is a
It'll be my
book for my
pleasure.
children to,
Wow.
So we're going to take it together from here.
We'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. No, go ahead. She's promised another one.
This discussion has thrown lights on aspects I'm sure we can all learn from. As we wind up this fireside chat, we thank our panelists today. Ms. Saikia, Ms. Datta, and Dr. Talwar have our heartfelt gratitude for taking the time out for engaging with students on such a critical topic. We look forward to hosting you again soon for more such events. IMT cherishes the success of its alumni, and the present batch stand to gain wisdom and knowledge from your continuous association with your alma mater. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to the alumni, of course, and thank you to the committee for organizing this and being a great audience. Thank you for.
Okay, can you all switch off the cameras? I want to ask a question. Just stay for a minute. Switch off all cameras, but please.